This is Steve Cochran, and welcome to Live from my office. Oh, what a week it's been, and not even a week yet. Today on Live from my office, I'm happy to say the moderator from Meet the Press, longest-running show in television history, host of MTP Daily on Meet the Press, the number one political voice at NBC and MSNBC, Chuck Todd, will join me. He's been a friend for a long time. He was on the radio with me for years. And he's got a lot of interesting things to say about what happened, about what may happen still, and what maybe should happen today on Live from my office. As always, sponsored by David Hochberg and Team Hochberg. You know, he just wants to save you money. Is that so wrong? And I hope you're well, and I hope you've had time to explain to your kids or your grandkids to the best of your ability what we saw last week. And I hope you can find some hope that this, in fact, will pass, that we will get beyond this. I truly believe we will, but I'm really hoping that President Trump comes to whatever senses he may have and doesn't push this any further. As for those who have already committed crimes or may still want to, they're taking their life in their own hands. And for all the law enforcement issues that are out there and all the law enforcement people who protect us every day, God bless you. I know these are difficult days ahead, but I'm pulling for you, and I think just about everybody else is as well. Please continue to do your job to the best of your ability and stay healthy as well. All right, so we got a lot to hear from Chuck Todd, who will join me in just a moment. I invite you as well to take a look at Live from my office, the show notes. CochranShow.com is where all the episodes live, as they do on most of the podcast websites. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're just about everywhere. And included in their social media links and the fact that you can always email me at thecochranshow@gmail.com. Important little charity to mention after we're done, but Chuck Todd joins me next. I'm Steve Cochran. I'm glad you're here, and this is Live from my office. If you're looking to purchase a new home to refinance your existing home, you need to do what I did. I called Team Hochberg, my trusted local lender. Oh, and you also need to meet Jack, 60 years old, a hotel executive, making $200,000 a year, living pretty well. The pandemic crushed the hotel industry, and Jack, like thousands of listeners, unfortunately lost his job. Jack was finalizing refinancing out of a construction loan when his lender declined his loan due to a lack of income. Jack was stressed out beyond belief, didn't know what to do, so he called Team Hochberg for a free consultation. Since Jack was of retirement age, Team Hochberg used his retirement assets to refinance his construction loan. So let me review here. When the pandemic hit, Jack lost his job and his lender declined his loan. Team Hochberg eliminated Jack's stress by using his retirement assets to refinance his construction loan. Team Hochberg helped me and thousands of my podcast listeners, like Jack, restructure loans after being turned down by others. But they can't help you if you don't call. 855-56-DAVID or go to 56david.com. Number again is 855-56-DAVID. That's 855-563-2843 or 56david.com. Homeside Financial is an equal housing lender. NMLS number 1124061. It's a pleasure. And by the way, he's playing hurt. It's my friend Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press, and also MTP Daily, along with, is running the news. Chuck Todd, who's had a hell of a week, as we all have, joins us now. First off, sorry about your voice. I know you feel okay, but I know you're struggling with it, and I appreciate you doing this.
No problem. I mean, you'll be glad to know that when people hear you on air with this voice issues, I get all sorts of home remedies. So it's always very helpful.
I can tell you in 30 years plus on radio, I never found one that worked. Did they are any of them, viable tries?
With you. Well, the most interesting concoction I made, at least made me feel good, which was I did lemon juice, hot water, and vodka with a little bit of honey in it. So it was a nice way to enjoy one of the football games yesterday.
I think they call that
I don't know if it helps.
Yeah.
I-O.
All right. So,
But
so here we are on the Monday after last Wednesday. And, I've got kids and I've got 2 little grandkids. You've got 2 kids. And I look at these kids and go, what the hell are we doing? What kind of country are we turning over to them? Have you had a chance to tell anybody your personal thoughts on this? I mean, is there anything outside of the on-air stuff that you'd like to say?
it's interesting, Steve. I realized the other day how numb Trump has made us to what the last 5 years have done. So Wednesday's happening in real time. I'm anchoring it on the air, and and it's really actually in hindsight a bit disconcerting because none of us know the extent of what's happening in there.
Right.
None of us do. We know it's bad. We hope it's not worse. And you're just sitting there, and it was, it was, and I can only imagine watching it, right? Especially having been, anybody that had been through 9/11 as an adult, whether in the news business or watching the news business, it felt like the same. Oh my God, we're watching this in real time.
Right.
Jesus, what's going to happen next? Right. And then the next day, I go back to the Capitol. I go back down there. It's empty. I'm not saying it feels like another day, but it feels like another day in the pandemic, right? Quarantine DC is got no traffic in it the way I'm sure quarantine, Chicago, quarantine, New York, everybody has the same. And I was like, wait a minute, are we moving on? Don't move on, for a second there. And then all of a sudden, all the more user-generated videos started surfacing, and you start to realize how more violent the raid was, how, frankly, we dodged a bullet. I mean, there were, we are lucky there were some stupid people storming the Capitol.
100%.
Because they basically, had this been any sort of properly trained operation, there could be dead senators, dead members of Congress, a kidnapped vice president. And I don't think we fully have appreciated that. And so, it's funny. I was trying to articulate this for my staff the other day. I said, it was at the beginning when we came back from the New Year. I said, when I was in my 20s covering the Clinton era, which was just, is there any, I don't know what's more superficial now, the 80s or 90s. What do you say?
Probably the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
At
least we had the Cold. We used to have the Cold War in the 80s, right? There was some seriousness to that, right? The 90s, right? Our some of our biggest problems, in midnight basketball, right? And I remember back then thinking, boy, I hope, I'm wondering, what would it have been like to cover American politics in the 60s, in the civil rights era? What would it have been like in the 50s? What would it have been like during the Nixon era? Right. That's what young journalists think about.
Sure.
Right? And then all of a sudden, as the Trump era has been winding down, and even obviously before the raid, I was thinking, well, okay, we don't have to wonder anymore. Our generation got its test. We now will be telling stories in 20 years. People will ask us, boy, what was it like to cover the Trump era? The Trump era. My God, we almost lost the country during the Trump era. And I think that's what we have to sort of come to grips with.
Well, I don't think
we almost lost the country. We almost lost the country. And I think that we still could. I'd like to believe Wednesday was an inflection point that sobers up enough Americans so that this does not become the 1850s. But I don't know.
It's what you just said that frightens me, because what we have is a group of politicians who want this to go away. But the stupid side of this will keep it going, whether on their own social media accounts or their own need for validation and whatever's not going right in their lives. But, I'll tell you what scares me. 400 million guns in this country, 74 million people voted for Donald Trump. Let's say 1/10 of 1% of those folks are nuts. That's 74,000 people with guns. They weren't all in D.C.
Yeah. I have to tell you something, too. I've been obsessed with a certain period in American history, which is between Andrew Jackson and Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
We had 7 We basically with eight presidents, I believe, in 24 years. Six by election, two by death, two others due to deaths.
Mm-hmm.
And the same issue, they all were dealing with the same issue, right? Which was, what are we doing about slavery? How do you expand the country when half the country says we shouldn't be in a slave economy? Half the country is still fighting for it.
Yep.
The leadership of the country, it was this constant struggle, and each president tried to compromise. And it was interesting when you look at it, because I've been studying these presidents for multiple reasons. One, is Trump worse than Buchanan or not? Right? That was sort of my one sort of focal point, right? I've always had this belief that Buchanan lost the country, and as long as you don't lose states, you get to finish about Buchanan. Okay. And
it's a bad list.
Now I don't think that's the case, because, the more I've read about James Buchanan, he didn't intentionally lose the country. Donald Trump wants the country to be divided up. He would prefer two countries. He would, especially if one is his. So, I do think now, he always wants to be the outlier. Congratulations. He's now the outlier. He's just number one on the wrong list. So, but the thing that I keep taking away from what I've learned, what you do, and you realize is you can't compromise on morality.
Right.
The biggest mistake we made in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, and why we ended up fighting a civil war, is that we compromised on morality for too long until we realized it's too late. And I hope that's the one lesson everybody needs to take away from this, which is, we might be going down this path here. And maybe it's, look, I'm still going to believe that we're a generation away from this being in the rearview mirror for this reason. I think we fail to recognize how short our multiracial democracy has been in existence. You went to segregated schools in elementary school, didn't you, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I was 5 years removed from Miami desegregating when I first started school. You get my point here. There is still a lot of people who were raised in segregated America, and that makes up a lion's share of when you look at those white folks. They make a larger share of the Trump base, and they're the ones that feel somehow. They're the ones that are saying, I don't know what my country looks like or whatever it is. Well, it's because they were raised in a different country. And I think we have to both recognize this, not to be empathetic is not the right word.
To learn.
But we have to be realistic. We have to be realistic that this is a group of folks that are going to die off.
Well,
this generation will die off.
It's no different than
and it will continue to get.
Yes. We feel like we're better than the rest of the world. In so many ways we are, but Middle Eastern, Arab, and Jewish children have to be the ones that separate themselves from the fathers and mothers and grandfathers that they love, who have told grandmothers that they love, who have told them the same thing over and over again, and go, no, that's not right. We're just people.
By the way, how about Schwarzenegger?
Yeah, it's great.
The story he shared about his father.
Great. Brutal, but great.
Because what he was basically, exactly, but it was a reminder that what he wanted to say is, because he also wanted to say something, good people can get talked into doing bad things.
Yep.
Good people, with the wrong leadership, with the wrong, I tell you, I spent the weekend reading every local story of somebody arrested. Mm-hmm. Not the national stories, but the local stories, right? The guy in Chicago, the tech CEO, the real estate woman, that I think was also happened to be Chicago, actually. And it is if they I'm going to take that gentleman, the tech CEO, at his word. It's as if he was under a spell. And then and then it was broken, right? And then it was like this fantasy world broke it. It's like he got lost in a fantasy world, and now he knows his life's ruined.
Right.
Now, I hope that statement he said actually is what he feels, because then empathy that's needed.
I think you found
it's needed if we're gonna.
I think you found a vein of truth there amongst a lot of people, and it's what Schwarzenegger said. I think the words he used were, "Some just went along," and that's what we saw so much of. But nonetheless, as you said, lives ruined, price has to be paid. But when does Trump pay the price? And that brings me to the McConnell question here. McConnell lost his way a long time ago, whether or not he ever had a way. And for him to say, I'm not even going to take up impeachment, is no surprise to anybody that's paying any attention. But here's who I have a problem with as well. Nancy Pelosi made a very public statement last week and said, I talked to the general about the codes and how dangerous it is and how the president shouldn't have access to the codes. And we hope to get an article of impeachment out by next Wednesday. Well, it's either a 911 or it isn't. So explain to me why Congress can't move faster on this, because if I hear one more person say censure, you know this, outside the Beltway, nobody gives a shit about a censure. It means nothing.
It means nothing. Look, I think I have a path that I think could work, and it would be following the path of 74. Nixon didn't leave until he realized he'd lost his party, right? But Nixon didn't lose his party till the very end. I think the single most important person right now in Washington's on the Republican side of the aisle is Liz Cheney. Other than Mitt Romney, she is the only one that has morally clean hands on Trump, more so than anybody else, right? And she has been a pariah in her own House conference for not going along. Her father was Gerald Ford's chief of staff and is well aware of the importance sometimes. He was there. He knew, when you have to throw Nixon away, right? When you knew when it was time.
Yep.
Cheney wrote that op-ed. I just think here that if she could come out, say, look, I'm voting for impeachment, I think 24 House, a couple dozen House Republicans will follow her. And you may say, and look, 24 to me is a lot.
Of course it is, yeah.
And because I think that would then translate to it. And if Trump thinks, oh my God, this is actually going to happen, then maybe he sobers up and says, okay, let me go get my pardon and get out of here.
Yeah. And
look, I don't know if it's going to work, but to me, as you just said, this is a 5-alarm fire, or a 7 or an 8. If we can keep whatever number way is, that add an alarm to it. Right.
Yeah.
That's about the only way to speed this up. Look, there is no other faster way for this. In McConnell's defense, I can't believe I'm saying this.
There's a sentence you wouldn't say normally.
All right, I know. But you have to get, and I know everybody's saying, oh, geez, roll your eyes in congressional rules. In order to get the Senate to come back before the 19th, you have to get unanimous consent to do that. Is Josh Hawley? That includes Josh Hawley. That includes Ted Cruz. That includes Rand Paul, right? The guys that never give unanimous consent, essentially to bring the Senate back early. So essentially what McConnell is saying, now, I think he should try and make Hawley do it. Right? Make Hawley stand in the way of it. Put him on the record.
100%.
But that is, and the other thing is I am now relatively confident that the president can't do any more major damage, because there are people that are not going to take orders, okay, on bad stuff. He is right. There are some emergency guardrails that have been put in place,
and his main platforms have been taken.
Pence is a part of it. That's right. So I do think we now, could he be selling pardons right now? Could he be selling defense? Yes, all of it. There is that stuff that I think, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about until after the fact and we find out. But I do think it's important to disqualify him from ever running for office again.
So do I.
I think it would be highly irresponsible of us as a country if we let somebody who essentially, Trump is such an idiot. So it's very hard to sit there and say he was trying to orchestrate a coup. Although, by the way, we settled on insurrection over coup for one simple reason. The accepted definition of coup includes military. And since the military wasn't involved, that's why more of us use the word insurrection.
I think it's right. And also, I don't think Trump could spell insurrection, so that takes him off the hook for that as well.
You think he can spell? You think he could pronounce coup?
He could. Well, yeah,
he could spell coup. Do you think he could pronounce coup?
It'd be a coup d'etat.
Easy. The coup d'etat.
But the fact of the matter is, he is on some level dangerous because he still has the title and the power of the presidency. And it just, and it's not just me, it's not just you. I think every American on some level, right-thinking American, and that's the majority of us by far, are going, what the hell is Congress doing?
Well, and I just think this is a case where it's hard to move any faster. And I might argue, as frustrating as it is to watch this in real time, because look, let me introduce more things that I'm currently concerned about.
Okay.
We don't know who used the chaos of Wednesday to perhaps infiltrate the computer systems of Congress. I was talking to one IT expert who said Congress has to assume that during that 4-hour period when they did not have control of the Capitol, that they have to assume they also had their networks infiltrated. They have to assume classified information was pilfered. We don't know. There are a lot of morons in there in that thing, but we don't know if somebody hid among the morons to do real damage. And I think that's something that it shows you that I think the extent of the damage that was done, we don't know yet. And by the way, watch, don't be surprised if you start to see right-wing propaganda of either real leaked stuff that was stolen or fake leaked stuff that was stolen.
That's a great point.
From that Capitol raid, and I think it's going to be something that starts to percolate on the right-wing propaganda machine.
Because everybody talks to you, another great concern is Capitol security. The fact that a Capitol security officer died in these circumstances, and Trump couldn't even lower the flags at the White House to have staff is just beyond outrageous. The fact that you had and have senators and House members saying we should move on when their lives were being protected in part by the man that died and others. The vast majority, and I'll back cops up forever, but the vast majority of Capitol security are fine. But of people that are talking to you, didn't there have to be some measure of an inside job here for people to get where they went, for people to do what they did? Again, we're not talking about people who are brain surgeons here planning something elaborate. A lot of it just happened. What are you hearing about Capitol security officers, a handful, whatever, being in on this?
Well, I would say, look, there's certainly a lot of suspicion, but I think that it's possible that's concentrated in the wrong place. I think that we need to look at congressional staffers of the members of, I think we're in some ways the simplest explanation is where you should start. And I would begin at Mo Brooks' staff, Paul Gosar's staff. Don't forget, you had Jim Clyburn made a fascinating just observation, and he certainly has his own suspicion. He has a ceremonial office that wasn't touched, and his more hidden office where the real work gets done on the third floor of the Capitol was absolutely ransacked. And he goes, and I know where his office is. And as he said on my show on Friday, he said, some members of Congress don't know how to find their way there. And I'm like, yes, I know. You got to go up these old staircases, because I love going up them, because I always think, me and John Quincy Adams have both climbed this staircase. Right. It's such a cool feeling, right? I always love that feeling in the Capitol. When you have walked the same halls as these founders and as these people. But it isn't easy to find. I know it's easy for the left to assume that, hey, there is this law and order streak and all cops, and they all are politically somehow going to be more maybe lenient or more whatever you might want to assume sympathetic to the Trump crowd. I actually think the more obvious place to look is in the members of Congress and their staff and the staff, because these are the radicalized people, right? The Capitol Police live in my neighborhood, we all know how this works. Live in our community. I'm not saying you're not going to have one or two bad apples that might have been in there and might have been sympathetic. I am more inclined to believe any inside help came from congressional staff, and that's the first place I'd be looking.
Well, that's
to be honest. I mean,
it's
look,
a great point, and it makes me feel better about the story in general. But what's your level of confidence that that's going to be figured out?
You know, I've got more high level confidence than you might think, because I think the FBI is ashamed a bit, and even though it's not on them, the FBI, to their credit, if you recall, Christopher Wray came out 4 months ago and he essentially said that QAnon was a domestic terror threat. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, there were so many people wearing Q material that is now, that's just not a warning, it's a reality. We already know this. They have now struck. Okay, the QAnon is now the weathermen. Okay, the weathermen, right, became famous in the 60s and said right. This is QAnon, right? There it is. They're now a domestic terrorist organization that has successfully infiltrated the Capitol in our history books.
Of course, the weathermen were
so I actually
not
think
to
the
wear
FBI,
fur vests and horns, but that's another story.
Right.
Well, and look,
I think that
I know you're going to get.
I do believe that the FBI is no. I do believe that the FBI is going to, that this is going to be more thorough over time, and this is where I think we will find out who's involved. Now, look, the biggest thing I'm going to mourn in the next 6 months is I don't think the Capitol is going to be as public as it has been.
Right.
I think that the Capitol becomes as hard to get into as the White House, which is it's inevitable. I would say it's a shame, but honestly, I wouldn't want to work there. I wouldn't want to work there under the current security conditions.
No, I wouldn't either. In any chance the Biden inauguration would be moved to the Oval Office or something, because we know Trump's
not at all. I've asked that. He is defiant on that. He wants to be, in that sense, he doesn't want that to be any different. And you know what? I get that, right? You don't want to look like you cave. We're going to have 9-foot fences. And the secret, as Hakeem Jeffries told me on the show on Sunday, the Secret Service is in charge of security for the inauguration, not the Capitol Police.
Yeah, and I noticed that Hakeem Jeffries told you that how confident he was, and it's just hard to share that confidence now. But I do have faith and believe in those that have to secure the president-elect, and he can't get here soon enough. All right, I know.
I don't believe I'll be able to. I don't believe I'll be able to move around Capitol Hill for the next month and a half. But I think he'll be secure. Yeah.
And we've already cooked your voice a little too far, but I do have to ask you one last question. One of the things that I think is great about President-elect Biden is his continued statements about whether you voted for me or not, I want to be your president. I want to do what's right for you. Is compromise a fantasy at this point, or is the outrageousness of Trump and what happened last Wednesday enough to bring some right-thinking Republicans back towards the center to actually get something done, especially when the Democrats control all three chambers now? So what is it? What is the history of compromise going forward?
I am cautiously optimistic about Senate Republicans. Not all of them, but I think that there is enough that feels shame that at least in the first 6 months of the Biden administration, they're going to make an extra effort. Look, Biden is too. Biden loves the Senate. Biden wants this to work. So Biden you'll see more stories about, Bill Cassidy had lunch with the president this week, Republican senator from Louisiana, John Barrasso, and Biden is going to, he will, Obama never had that one more meeting with Capitol Hill. He looked at that place and frankly looked at it the way a lot of us can look at it, pretty cynically. Biden reveres the Senate. If he's dismissive of the Senate, then he's dismissive of himself. You know what I mean by that? He will never be dismissive of these people. And so I think that effort will pay small dividends. So for instance, I'm optimistic. I think he can get a public option. I absolutely believe he can get a lot done on healthcare this year, COVID relief this year, infrastructure this year.
Be huge.
On those three, I think he can find a governing coalition of 6 to 10 Republicans, so that, because here's the other thing, on those 50-50 Senate votes, when Democrats can get it party line, They're going to be Republicans who, when they realize the bill's going to pass, they'd rather be on the passing side of the bill than on the non-passing side of the bill.
Right.
So you'll always be, so instead of the usual 2 or 3 of your Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, you'll get Bill Cassidy to do stuff every once in a while. You'll get the folks that, frankly, I think you're Tom Tillis and Richard Burr, who realize they have to look more like the new North Carolina than the old North Carolina.
Right.
And you know what? This is going to frustrate the living daylights out of the left. But Lindsey Graham and Joe Biden are going to do business. Lindsey Graham and Joe Biden are going to do business together. And it's going to drive people on the left crazy. But Joe Biden can't help himself. He will put his arm around anybody who shows a tiny bit of contrition. And Lindsey, the way Lindsey is. I think Steve Schmidt described Lindsey Graham pretty harshly, but pretty well, saying that he's he called him a pfeiffer fish that always has to sort of swim with a shark, can't swim on his own, always has to sort of attach itself to a bigger fish.
Right.
And he used to be with the McCain shark. Now he's with the Trump shark. And now he realizes that almost got him killed. So he's going to be searching for a new shark. So he may swim with Biden for a little while. Then he may swim, he's going to, and look, I know it's going to make some on the left go bonkers when it happens.
Yeah. And I can tell you right now, I hope it does. I not just hope it happens. I believe you're right. And the left going bonkers, we're doing the people's business,
and here's one more thing about Joe Biden, and I'm probably putting the bar too high. Let me tell you about in our history, we had another oldest elected president who a lot of people thought was about 4 or 8 years past his prime, who thought will probably be a one-termer, who was replacing what was considered a failed president. And he ended up defining his party for a generation. Nobody expects Joe Biden to define his party for a generation, which means you should bet on Joe Biden redefining his party for a generation.
Right.
I just think he could end up becoming a more consequential president than any of us thought. And it almost basically all happened by accident.
Well, my friend, I could talk to you forever, and I really appreciate you doing this. And I hope you'll drop everything you do to listen to Live from My Office whenever you can. All right, buddy. Be well.
Yeah, you got to break glass. You got it. I will.
Thanks, man. Want to take a minute to thank the title sponsor of Live from My Office, David Hochberg and Team Hochberg. Tell you a quick story in light of all the stuff that's been going on. A lot of businesses would shy away from doing their typical promotion and advertising when a program has to discuss the troubles that involve politics. David Hochberg has never shied away. He's one of the most opinionated people I've ever met, but my finding is, with admittance that I'm his friend, is that he's right about most of it. And when he's wrong, believe me, I'm the first to let him know. But he's not wrong about this. He believes America is better together. He believes that we all need the justice that should be brought against all of the perpetrators and the inciters, to invent a word, of last week's melee. And he believes that that will come. He has hope, and I do too. So I just wanted to take a second and say thank you, David Hochberg. And by the way, they're doing great business at Team Hochberg. All they want to do is save you money. I tell you time and time again, refinancing, financing, student loan issues, trying to get your credit score fixed. Team Hochberg's helped me and my family, and they can certainly help you. Their number is 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com. That's 855-56-DAVID or 855-563-2843. Homeside Financial and Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 1124061. Every episode of Live from My Office includes a plug, if you will, for a worthy charity, and this is no exception. It's called Ryan Banks Academy. Ryan Banks Academy was started by a woman who I'm very impressed with. More on her in a moment, but Niazi Ryan Banks was a very happy kid, 12-year-old boy, full of life, very popular with his friends, one of the happiest seventh graders that you could ever see at New Sullivan Elementary School on Chicago's Far East Side. May 19th, 2012, Niazi Ryan Banks was shot and killed by gunfire. Ryan's social worker is a woman named Valerie Groth. She wanted to do something special in his memory, and boy, has she accomplished that. It's the Ryan Banks Academy. Opened its doors in September of 2018. Operates as a day school with the goal of soon becoming the first urban boarding school in Chicago. And RBA helps students from all socioeconomic backgrounds become the next generation of leaders and thinkers and world changers, all in memory of Ryan Banks. It's an important cause. And for those of you who struggle sometime, or how can I help those that aren't as privileged as I might be or my family is, that live in tough neighborhoods or on the wrong side of town, to use a generalization, the Ryan Banks Academy is really doing some amazing work. I hope you'll look into it. It's easy to do. You can donate your money and your time to ryanbanksacademy.org. And thank you, Valerie, for letting me know about it years ago. I'm proud of you and all that you continue to do. ryanbanksacademy.org. That's ryanbanksacademy.org. Tell your friends we are here live from my office every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with new episodes. Thank you to Chuck Todd. My voice is a little iffy. I think maybe I caught it from Chuck. Can you do that on a podcast? In the meantime, thanks to Ross Cochran for taking care of getting this up and out to you every time we do a new episode. And I hope you'll check out his podcast as well for Awana, AWANA, an organization that so many of you know about if you grew up in Chicago. In the meantime, on Wednesday, Rick Kaplan, guy that used to run MSNBC, he ran CNN. Greatest mistake he made there was having me work there and fill in. He was an executive producer for Walter Cronkite and Peter Jennings and Ted Koppel, Katie Couric, and on and on. I mean, one of the absolutely essential voices in news and journalism. That's Wednesday, because we've got plenty to talk about when it comes to covering our times when we do the next Live from My Office. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Live from My Office, a service of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. The podcast is hosted by Steve Cochran, and it's mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran. Support the show by subscribing wherever you're listening and by telling your friends about it. Follow Steve on all social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And make sure you check out this episode's show notes for relevant information discussed during the conversations. You can also email the show directly at thecochranshow@gmail.com with any questions or comments. And that's the best place to tell us about your favorite nonprofit so we can make sure we mention them on the next episode. Steve is available for corporate speaking gigs. He would love to MC your event. And occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to cochranshow.com for more.